Are you a businesswoman who is finding it challenging to get your ideas across and make a point? Welcome to Speakers Who Get Results with Elizabeth Bachman, a podcast dedicated to helping women get the visibility they want, whether making a speech or talking in a meeting. Every week, get valuable lessons from Elizabeth or learn from her roundtable conversations with experts and speakers on how to make a difference, not just a point. On to the show with your host, Elizabeth Bachman.
Erica Anderson Rooney. I am so happy to meet you and to have gotten you on the podcast. You were recommended to me by one of my other podcast guests, and I went, how have I not known you before now? So I'm just delighted to have you here.
Oh, Elizabeth, I cannot wait to dive into this conversation. I am so honored to be here as well.
Well, good. Well, before we talk about gender equity and the things we can do about it, let me ask you about your dream interview. So if you could interview somebody who's no longer with us, who would it be? What would you ask them? And who should be listening?
Oh my gosh. When I thought about this question, I really had to think about it. Like I had to take a pause, and the person that came to my mind that I just could not shake was Elizabeth Taylor.
The actress Elizabeth Taylor.
Yes, I think she has the most fascinating life. You know, she grew up this childhood star kind of in a time when the world was really just coming into its own and all of this other stuff. But this is a woman, when you look back at her life, she was married 8 times to 7 men. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, that's unheard of in today's world, let alone as she grew up throughout. But, you know, she struggled with what I call sticky floors throughout her life, was very public about them. She was the first celebrity to openly admit herself to the Betty Ford Clinic for addiction and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So just a very powerful woman. But I think what I would love to dive in and dig deep on it is figuring out and asking her, like, how did you stay so authentically true to yourself? Because that's the vibe I get from her. I just get this vibe that she really believed she deserved happiness and that she was entitled to it. And it didn't matter if she had to marry 8 men or not, she was going to go after it. So that would be my dream interview.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, that would be great fun. And I must say that in 5 years of this podcast, you're the first person who suggested Eric to Elizabeth Taylor. So yay, that would be great. I would be happy to be on that, to be listening to that. And, and also just, I loved the way that she became an activist then, and all the work she did for AIDS when nobody else was talking about AIDS. And when she said, these are human beings, and these are our brothers, our sons, our fathers. We need to be paying attention to this disease. And
which again was unheard of back then.
And I think most people have forgotten that, but that was a big part. She was a big factor in getting the medical community to actually pay attention to AIDS and say, it's just not for those crazy gay boys over there. So, yes.
I love it. She's just such a fascinating woman.
Yes. Great choice. Very interesting. So I'm curious. So you've written this book behind you called Glass Ceilings and Sticky Floors. As I've told you, I am so jealous. I wish I had thought of that first. Tell us, please, what the sticky floors are.
Yes. Well, we all know the glass ceiling. We've heard about that proverbial ceiling that women and minorities can't bump through. And Elizabeth, I am a woman. I am a relatively younger woman that got to the C-suite. And so I busted through these glass ceilings. Now, it was not easy by any means, but I kept looking at these really depressing statistics about a 132-year gender pay gap, a leadership gap, a mentorship gap.
Explain the 132-year gender pay gap.
Yeah. So according to the Pew Research Center, in order for a woman to be paid an equal dollar, because right now we're paid 80 cents for every $1 that a man earns, it will take 132 years to reach pay equity if we advance at the rate that we are advancing today. Right. And Elizabeth, that slowed down with the pandemic and when the pandemic hit, because so many people had to make a decision to stay home with their kids And who do you think that was?
Oh, yeah. Oh,
It was the
yeah.
women. Why was
Hmm.
it the women? Often because it was the women who were earning less. Why were we earning less? Because there's this pay gap that's looming.
Well,
So
and then
I
there's
wasn't about
also
to
the
be a part of this
maternity
pay gap.
bias. There's, the motherhood bias.
The
You just,
broken rung, the glass cliff. There are all of these things that impact women in the workforce.
mhm.
And so this idea of sticky floors was like, you know what? I'm not going to wait for the systems to fix themselves to get fixed. Like that type of work takes generations and generations to do. So what can I do? And I really got curious about that. And it became this looking inward process and where it almost, I imagine I'm just looking in and I'm looking all the way down and I'm looking at the floor that I'm standing on. And it's kind of like, we got to clean up our own mess. We got to clean up our own house if we're really going to shatter these ceilings. And so that's where this idea of sticky floors came into play. And it's like, what is within my span of control that is keeping me stuck, that is
Hmm.
keeping me held back, that's taking me longer to do things? Is it fear of what other people will think? Is it imposter syndrome? Is it perfectionism? And I actually started interviewing a ton of women who were in executive or VP level roles, and they
Hmm.
all had these different types of themes, whether it
Hmm.
was struggling with imposter syndrome or perfectionism. And so I really recognized that all of these women were going through the exact same things. We just weren't talking about it because we wanted to maintain this picture of, I've got it all together.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
I can do
I know that
everything.
one. Yeah. Mhm.
Yes. And so that's kind of where the concept of sticky floors began. But it's really this movement to say, we don't have to wait for the systems to fix themselves. Let's start internally, and then together we can work on the system.
You know, I, I, I do very similar work with women, approaching it through language and how we talk about what we do. And what I've noticed is, women are constantly saying, men, they just don't listen. They just don't listen. But actually, when you break it down, it's maybe half, 50% that men don't listen. And but the other 50% is how women stop themselves.
Mm.
So I'm curious, what are some of the what are some of the factors on this sticky floors? What's some of the glue that keeps us stuck?
When you said that, the very first thing that came to my head about communication was this idea that women have a tendency to kind of soften things.
Yeah.
Instead of being very direct with what do we need, what do we want? I need to make $100,000 a year and I need to work 4 days a week, right? It's a very simple ask, but a lot of times women will come around and say, well, I could make more money. That would be helpful. But like, I really love what I do. So it's okay if that doesn't work out for you, you know? And so we try to placate it a lot and we try to make it nice for other people, right? It's this whole idea of people pleasing and doing for others and putting ourselves last, which is often something that we do as
Which I
women.
think we are socialized to do as
100%.
as girls. It is, it is a
100%.
leftover. It's a holder. Thank you, ancestresses. Thank you, foremothers. It is, I think that that's a holdover from the days when women had to placate men because men had all the temporal power. I was just reading a novel set in the 1890s, um, and one man caught his wife having an affair and consigned her to an insane asylum. And nobody nobody
Seems
questioned it.
reasonable.
Nobody questioned it. He just, because he wanted to get rid of her. And there was no way she could do something about that. That, of course, was a novel, but that actually happened. So let me ask you then, there's also a penalty for being too direct. So how do we walk that tightrope?
So it's interesting that you bring that up. My friend Allison Forgale just wrote the best book on this, and it's
Mhm.
called Likeable Badass. But it is all for women, and it's about how do you show up as both caring and competent at the same time. Because you're right.
Mhm.
If we show up too direct, We're bossy, we're a bitch, we're mean, all of
Yeah.
the things. So it's like you have to show up being a bit warm so that people do
Hmm.
like you, but also express your competence and your skills and your abilities. And it is a fine line, but like, you know what women are so tired of? We're so tired of trying to find that damn line, and walk that line. And we want to show up as just our own authentic selves, but it takes time to get there, right?
Hmm.
And people do have to like you to get ahead, especially when we're in corporate America. So you have
Yeah.
to figure out, how can I be liked and respected at the same time?
Hmm.
And that's
So
a great
how do we
mystery.
do that?
I'm a big fan of getting to know your people one on one, and I spent years as a chief people officer in tech. And what I have found is that when you establish those relationships and you
Hmm.
really focus in on getting to know the person for who they are and what matters to them, what they care about, then
Hmm.
you can become warm and approachable and people learn to trust you. So for me, that all stems from relationships and really pouring into the other person, getting to know who they are.
Absolutely. And and it makes such a difference. Is why I'm so glad we're finally talking about emotional intelligence and the fact that men need to learn how to relate. That's Men don't get a pass for being bossy and obnoxious anymore. Um,
They don't.
they get
And
get away with it longer because we have this historical paradigm that that's what men do.
yes.
But yeah, um,
But times are shifting, right? I mean, they say one of our greatest assets of being a female leader is our empathy, because we are
mhm,
talking now about bringing our whole selves to work.
right.
Back in the day, it was very compartmentalized.
Hmm.
You showed up to the office, you left your baggage at home, you did your work, and then you went home at 5 o'clock at the end of the
Hmm.
day. But also back then, there were no emails, there were no late night phone calls, there were no 24/7 operations. So life was very
Or
much
global teams,
compartmentalized.
global
Right.
teams at different
Yeah.
hours, talking to at different
And
hours a day. Yeah.
yeah, and now we're much more integrated, which means if I can't compartmentalize work, I can't compartmentalize myself, who I
Hmm.
am. So we really do need more female leaders to step up and show up and be authentic in the workplace and bring that emotion in it as well.
So this might be a dangerous question.
Let's
Uh,
go.
how can you show up as caring and empathetic without giving away your power and doing so much to support your team that you don't lead? There's another fine line to walk.
Yeah, and I mean, here's the thing, right? People love collaboration, but they also love decision makers.
Hmm.
So you have to really understand, again, another fine line. What is that line of collaborating with your team, seeking out expertise, understanding the landscape, and then making decisions? And
Hmm.
I'm a big fan of making decisions quickly and moving on and learning from any mistakes that come from it. So
Hmm.
when I lead teams, when I work to establish that trust, I also work about establishing failure and
Yeah.
encouraging the team to fail fast, own those failures, and then move on. And that's how I approach it.
There's one thing that I learned when I founded an opera company and I was a boss. Now, I'd been working for 20 years by then in the opera business, but as a stage director, your role is very specifically defined. And so I could collaborate and give instructions because that's what I was supposed to do. And then when I had to help my team and work with my team, thank God I had a number two who finally sat me down and said, "Be clear, don't hint." And I realized that I had been trained, like many women, to give a hint. Wouldn't it be nice if such and such happened? Which just confused the people who were working for me. And I didn't realize until she said that. And so, that's one of those things where I see now with my clients, they want a promotion and they drop a hint in front of the manager and the manager's thinking of something else and the manager doesn't notice it. And then they think, "Oh my God, she hates me." but they didn't actually ask.
Well, and being direct and clear, it's kind when you're asking for something, it's kind when you're giving direction, it's kind when you're looking for feedback to
Mm-hmm.
receive or give it. So
Mm-hmm.
you're right. We have this very American way of kind of dancing around the subject and hoping somebody just understands whatever we're saying between the lines
Right.
instead of just asking for the thing that we need either to be done or what we want.
Yeah. So how do you help people learn to be decisive like that? To
Mm,
learn to make those asks? Because that's scary if your whole subconscious programming is don't ask, don't be pushy, don't be greedy. That was my mother's word. Yeah, don't be greedy.
don't be greedy.
Yeah.
Yeah. It depends on the situation, Elizabeth, but I'm a big believer in uncovering what is the root cause that of your fear behind making
Hmm.
that ask, because that's what it is. There's something there. Are you scared they're going to say no? Are you scared they're going to laugh at you?
Hmm.
Are you worried what will happen if? And so when we're talking about making these big asks, I always ask people to game out the worst case scenario
Hmm.
and then game out the best case scenario
Hmm.
because it could go either way. You don't know, you know?
Hmm.
And I work with people on the mindset because if you are going to ask for something, whether that's a raise, whether that's a piece of feedback, whether that is something that you need, if you are going to ask for something, you need to be very direct in your answer and you need to be very clear with who you're speaking about, but do it in a way that doesn't leave room for misinterpretation, is another
Ah,
thing, right?
oh,
Because
yes.
yes, often we will just say a raise would be great, right? And we think I'm being very direct. I'm asking for this increase. You know, Elizabeth, I would
Hmm.
like a raise.
Hmm.
Great. Elizabeth gives me 2%.
Yeah.
Well, that's not what I meant. I meant 10%, you know?
Hmm.
And then you leave feeling disappointed. So it's really being very clear holistically with the entire ask, gaming out
Hmm.
best case and worst case,
Yeah.
and then following through with that. But a big piece of the mindset too is you already have the no, right? If
Yeah.
you're going to ask me for an increase and you don't ask, you already have the no. But if you do
Oh,
ask,
say
you
that. So
might
if
get
you're going
the
to ask,
yes.
if you're going to ask for the raise, if you need a raise and you don't ask,
You already
then
have the
that's
no.
they've already said no because you
Yeah.
didn't ask.
So that's a
Yeah.
good way to kind of switch your mindset around is that you already have that no. So we're already
Okay.
there if you don't ask. But if
Yeah.
you do ask, there's a potential for a yes.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. I had somebody tell me once years ago, um, you'll never know if you don't play the game. Yes, you might lose, but you might win. And I thought, oh no, couldn't possibly. That was that
Couldn't
was
possibly,
that was in my
couldn't
early
possibly do
30s.
that.
I thought, oh no, it's just about I just there's no way they'll say yes. And and my friend said, what if they did? And I had to get past a lot of built-in resistance because I
Yeah.
was so connected to the idea that they would say no. And that is actually something I see so many other women. I mean, thank God that was years ago. But I see so many women still doing it and talking ourselves into that.
We do. And one thing we have to remember is fear is a mile wide, but an inch deep. And so if we
Hmm.
can just go that 1 inch, we're good. We're good.
Yeah.
But we look at it and we see this big, monumental, expansive thing that we can't possibly get around. But it's
Hmm.
not about going around it, it's about going through it.
I love that. That's wonderful. So you have this four-step framework
Yes, I do.
to deal with it, to get ourselves unstuck from the sticky floors.
Yes.
I want to send in Carol Burnett's washerwoman with her mop. It's just like
No
clear.
mops here. No
Yeah.
mops here, Elizabeth. But this is the framework that it's really helped me move through my sticky floors. It's also
Hmm.
a bit rooted in science, but I call it my SNAP framework.
Uh-huh.
And it's catchy, snap out of your sticky floors, right? But it's all about first stopping. So that's for the S, stop and
Mm-hmm.
take note of the physical sensations in your body. Because
Mm-hmm.
I don't know about you, but I can ignore warning signs for so long. I can push it way down deep. But if you stop and take note, like, is your heart racing? Are you experiencing anxiety? Are your palms clammy? Are they sweaty? Are you antsy? Like, what are those physical sensations that are going on in your body?
Mm-hmm.
And then we need to name that sticky floor. So we're stopping, we're taking note, then we're naming our sticky floor because once you name that sticky floor, you start to take power back. You
Uh-huh.
start to take ownership over that sticky floor. And I'm a big fan of like, you cannot unring the bell. So once you are aware of it and you pull that into the conscious mind, okay, I'm struggling with perfectionism, or I'm struggling with the fear of saying, the wrong thing, or I'm struggling with the no. And so you name it, you take the power back. Then you have to ask and answer. So that's step A. Ask and answer some deep and personal questions. That's really peeling back the layer of the onion to go deep and try to figure out, why do I feel this way? Like what is going on in my life and in my past that leads me to think this thing? And it
Mm-hmm.
could be societal expectations, it could be the way you were raised, it could be what you have just learned through viewing of what's happened in your own home. But we all learn and take in the world and we perceive it and internalize it a different way. And so when you ask and answer those deep and personal questions, you can start to uncover the root cause. And then
Mm-hmm.
the magical step, this is the final step, is the P for pivoting, which is just a simple reframe. And that's changing your thoughts from I don't have to do this to I get to do this, or I haven't
Mm.
done this yet, to this is something I can conquer, from they're going to say no to, but what if they say yes?
Mm-hmm.
So it's one from really a life of limits to infinite possibility. And it's a complete mindset shift. And if you really hone in on answering and asking yourself those pivotal questions and then choosing a different thought, you
Mm-hmm.
will be amazed at how quickly you can pull yourself out of those sticky floors.
So one of the objections I get a lot is, but I'm so busy. I've got a job, I've got a family. I don't have time to do this sort of think work. So how do we fit that into our lives?
Oh, you have to make time. You
Yeah.
have to make time. Just like I tell people all the time, if you don't make time for your health and wellness, you will have to make time for illness, you know?
Yes.
So if you don't stop and dig through, like those problems are still going to come at you. And you might not recognize it right now. You
Mm-hmm.
might get passed over for small stretch projects and little promotions, and then you start to notice that your counterpart who's always asking for things and always standing up and raising their hand when you're sitting there quietly, they're getting more promotions than you. They're getting bigger
Mm-hmm.
increases than you. They're taking new jobs outside of the company, and you'll start to notice that they're taking quantum leap style jumps when you're just kind of being held back and slowly making progress.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's the thing about these sticky floors is like, it's not always this big catastrophic thing, but they are these tiny little moments that add up that over time keep you stuck.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. One of the things I found is the value of community,
Mm,
having a group that will help you give you some accountability and also not let you sneak back into the old habits.
yes.
How do you recommend finding a group like that?
Yeah. Well, I have a board of directors and I have them all for myself, but I don't make them up like I need to have one person who's really good in finance to help me with my business and one person who's really good at communications. My board of directors, I actually have a person that I call my hype person, and that is
Mm-hmm.
the person that they know I want to be a courageous person. They know I want to do the courageous things. So when I am playing small, and
Mm-hmm.
you always know when you're playing small. You might not
Right.
want to admit it, but you know it. I
Mm-hmm.
will call her and I will say, I'm thinking about doing this thing, whatever it is. Maybe it's starting a
Mm-hmm.
podcast. Maybe it's, putting myself out there for a big time speech that I didn't think I could ever get. And I'll tell her all the reasons why I can't do it or why I
Mm-hmm.
shouldn't do it or why I'll never get chosen or why they'll say no. And she usually lets me talk about it for a little bit. You know, we vent it out, and then she asks me to look at the opposite side of the coin. But what if you do get that position, Erica? But why shouldn't you apply, Erica? But what would you tell someone else in your position, Erica? And I allow that person, my hype person, to be a mirror back to me, because I am a hype woman for so many women out there. And I love doing that work. I love encouraging them and cheering them on. But again, we all have our own sticky floors. So I have to have that hype person who can flip the mirror around. And your question is, how do you find someone like that? You've got to get out and network. Like maybe you can find these people in your neighborhood. Maybe you can find them in your community. But if you are looking for people who can really help you level up, you've got to get out of the places that you are and into the rooms where those kind of people are.
Right.
And find yourself, whether you are paying to be in a different type of community. I do that, right? Like I'm in a women's community group that I pay to be a part of, because it is all high caliber executive level women.
Yes.
Sometimes you need to do that.
Yep.
You know, other times you might get lucky, but there's a lot of also community events that you can go to and different type of ERG groups that you can go to, and just honestly get on LinkedIn. Like LinkedIn is the place to reach out to people to say, hey, you're where I want to go. Can I pick your brain for a little bit? And you would be surprised at how many people are so open to sharing.
Yes. Yes. It is. I love this. Then if someone's listening to us and says, oh my goodness, they're speaking my language, I need to do it, I can't wait for the book to come in the mail, where's one place you can start?
Honestly, you can start at my website. That will take you anywhere and everywhere you want to go as it relates to me, but that's just ericaandersonrooney.com.
And what's one action that we could take? Somebody is listening to this and they get to the end of the recording and they say, I'm going to do something. What's one action they could take?
My favorite exercise that I encourage everyone to do every single day is take one brave bite, right? We're all so fearful of
brave bite.
One brave bite. We're all so fearful of the no, of the ask, of the what ifs, that I always tell people that how do you become a brave person? You do a brave thing every day. And that brave thing doesn't have to be a big thing, right? But over time, little brave bites become bigger brave bites, which become massive brave bites. And you become more and more comfortable and confident doing brave things. So I always tell people, if you want to do one thing today, figure out what is something that you're just a little bit nervous about, a little bit scared about, and take that brave bite.
I love it. I love it. Well, Erica, it has been such a delight to have you on the show. I really appreciate it. And I'm so glad we met. I'm totally going to follow you. And I hope this is going to be the first of many, many conversations that you and I have.
Oh, it was so much fun chatting with you, Elizabeth. Thank you.
So thank you for having been the guest. So this has been Speakers Who Get Results. I'm Elizabeth Bachman, your host. If you enjoyed this conversation, please subscribe to us on YouTube, on your favorite podcast app, tell your friends, and especially please leave us a good review on Apple Podcasts, because that's the one that the algorithms track. And so that's how people are going to find us. And you can listen to my conversation with Erica and many, many other experts if you hook on to Speakers Who Get Results. This has been Elizabeth Bachman. I'll see you on the next one.
We have just concluded another great episode of Speakers Who Get Results with your host, Elizabeth Bachman. If you got value from today's episode, please feel free to share us with your friends and colleagues. You may also visit elizabethbachman.com for additional resources. Be sure to tune in every week for new episodes, and thanks for tuning in.